Hi, I'm Ben Ferguson, and welcome to your AMAC Weekly News. First up this week, we inaugurated a new president of the United States of America, Joe Biden. And on the day of his inauguration, he already used executive orders to bring our country back into the Paris Climate Accords, which wasn't even an issue in the election, and also issue a mask mandate for federal property and interstate travel, which we basically already had. So what else did he decide to do? I'll tell you coming up in just a moment. Also, AMAC CEO Rebecca Weber is here to comment on the new president and what his policies are and how they're going to impact our AMAC members around the country and what you need to be taking a look at to make sure you know how to fight back. And finally, AMAC National Spokesman and former Assistant Secretary of State under Colin Powell, Bobby Charles, is here to update AMAC members on the latest AMAC headlines that you need to be paying attention to as we go into this new administration. Yes, there's a lot to cover, but a quick reminder, if you haven't shared this video with your family and friends, make sure you hit that share button right now. Your AMAC Weekly News, a big AMAC Weekly News with a new president, starts right now. I think it's fair to say that about half of America is happy that we have a new president of the United States of America, and there's 75 million Americans that are not very happy about the fact that Joe Biden is the president of the United States of America. The reality is we do have a new president of the United States. And less than a week after the inauguration, Joe Biden is already forcing America to regress to where it was before the Trump presidency. Much of what he is doing is not having to go through Congress. He's doing it through executive order. So let's start by taking a look at what Joe Biden actually did on day one of his presidency. He decided that executive actions was the way to go, doing things that weren't even issues during the election. Things like rejoining the Paris Climate Accord, repealing the Trump travel ban, halting the border wall construction, which we've seen through data actually had a significant impact in protecting this country from illegal immigrants coming in. Also, he decided to create a mask mandate, which we literally already had, extending the eviction freeze for those that would be evicted for not paying for their mortgage and or rent, and unveiling a new immigration plan, which would bring in millions of new voters just in time for his reelection in 4 years. He also decided to extend the student loan pause, so even if you have a job, you don't have to pay that bill for a while, all the way until the end of September, and it may move past that. And revoking the permit for the Keystone Pipeline because, yes, America must be dependent on Middle Eastern oil now. Joe Biden thinks it's a good idea. Now, let's be clear. Many of these moves are not intended to help the American people. They're being done solely for political reasons to make sure that people on the left are happy with his presidency. In fact, let me tell you who is actually helped by many of these moves. For example, the Paris Climate Agreement actually helps China and European countries while actually holding back American workers and American manufacturing jobs. Let's deal with the Keystone Pipeline, for example. Canceling that pipeline directly helps Russia and Russian oligarchs. It also helps Middle Eastern countries, including Iran. And if you have no wall, for example, that they stop the construction of, who does that help? It helps illegal immigrants and prospective terrorists that may want to break into America. Yes, these are the things that he decided were the most important things to do as soon as he walked in the Oval Office. Let's talk about the working class, for example. Was there much in there for the working class, for small businesses to help them reopen or have a real recovery? No, it was nowhere to be seen because these decisions made by the Biden administration is more about protecting the people in their party and actually making sure that you and your voice is silenced. Why do you think they're trying to give out amnesty to millions of illegal immigrants and change the rules that after you get a green card, you can actually vote in 3 years, right before the re-election, than what is the law right now, which says after you get your green card to be able to go and vote, you would have to wait 5 years. Yeah, this is what the Democratic Party is actually doing. And there's something else that shouldn't be shocking, yet it is. The administration has decided to pick an arbitrary number, a 100-day pause on deportations of illegal immigrants. You may ask the question, why? It's pretty simple. They're trying to see if those illegal immigrants in this country they can give citizenship to, and then they can vote for them in just 4 years when they're up for re-election. Now, at the same time, liberals in Congress plan to push for funding to programs meant to de-radicalize supporters of President Trump. Yes, that's actually happening. Don't worry, the Biden administration is saying we're not actually a part of that idea. It's just people in our party in Congress that are actually pushing this. Your money could also go to do something like that, de-radicalizing 75 million Americans that they say are radicals because you decide to vote for Donald Trump instead of Joe Biden. I also want you to hear what AOC had to say about the re-education of what she refers to as the white supremacists that voted for Donald Trump. Take a listen.
We had a program addressing white supremacists that we had programs, federal programs, that went towards funding organizations like these that de-radicalized people. And President Trump pulled the plug on federal funding for some of these programs. And so one thing that we know is that we have to get that funding right back up, and we probably need to double, triple, quadruple, or increase funding for these de-radicalization programs.
So whether you like it or not, if you voted for Donald Trump, you are now an extremist. You need to be de-radicalized, and your children need to be re-educated. This is what the country is going to look like under the new liberal Biden agenda. We all know Biden has no control over what happens in his administration. The extremists are the ones that are running the show, and this should concern all Americans. Now, we here at AMAC will continue to keep you updated on the changes being made by this new administration, and most importantly, how you can get involved to stop it. Well, this week was a tough week. If you are a supporter of conservative values, you see they're under attack in Washington, and Joe Biden is the president of the United States of America. So where do we go from here? Joining me now to talk about this is AMAC's Chief Executive Officer, Rebecca Weber. Rebecca, if you're a conservative, I think there's a depression that is happening in this country, and it may not be the time to get depressed. I would argue it's the time for us to get organized and for us to say, okay, where can we win battles? One of the biggest battles we're going to have to fight and win is on the silencing of conservatives. Even as Donald Trump was getting on Air Force One to fly to Florida, YouTube announced they're going to extend the ban on President Donald Trump. And we are seeing other conservatives that are now coming under attack from big tech because with the Democrats in control of the Senate and the House and the White House, we got to figure out new ways to win. So how are we going to do this, and what is AMAC doing about it?
Great question. Thank you, Ben. Well, first off, we need to recognize that the censorship of conservative voices is real. And we at AMAC, we have firsthand knowledge of how folks are censoring conservatives. The weapon that the left is using, unfortunately, is fear, Ben. AMAC will not let fear immobilize, prevent us from doing the things that we know we need to do. And you're right about talking about doing things on the state level. There's a lot that we can do there. We've got a lot of conservative Republican governors, for example. We took over more seats in the House, more Republican seats. So I do think that we've got a lot of people that are seeing that a lot needs to be done, but we can't let the left instill fear. When you look at other types of governments like communism and socialism, these are the tactics that are used in those types of governments. That type of ideology using fear to suppress our speech is certainly not something that our founding fathers imagined. And that's why our First Amendment right is so important. And we are committed, Ben, to working on the state levels. We've got hundreds of AMAC delegates that are actively working in their states, coordinating with AMAC, all of our efforts. So that is a major initiative for us in 2021.
You look at what the media is even doing now, and there was a shocking moment, even for CNN standards this week, where one of the morning show hosts actually asked the incoming communications director for the Biden administration, are you going to punish OAN, Newsmax, Fox News if they, quote, lie to the country? Are you going to take away their access? And what you're seeing now is groups, even like CNN, that are supposed to be at least standing up for other journalists to do their job, right?
That's
that
right.
Are saying, now that we have power, we want you to kick them out of the White House. We want you to silence them. We want you to deplatform them. I've never honestly thought or imagined that I would ever witness this in America, a news organization actually asking the White House communication director, hey, are you going to get rid of those people that we don't like?
That's right. I never would have imagined this either, Ben. I think that these threats against conservatives must be met with more speech, not less speech. And people are angry, but we need to remind ourselves that anger really shouldn't be a motivator. We need to be thoughtful. We need to control our anger because AMAC is absolutely against political violence. But that goes for the left too, not just the right, whose voice is being suppressed. So I think that when the media and left-leaning Democrats call people like you and I violent because we're calling out and against suppression of conservative voices, it's going to prompt more resentment. And anytime you see that occur, that's not good for our country. It certainly doesn't unify us. So our hope is that the new administration will recognize early on that pointing fingers because we don't necessarily adopt your ideology or see things through the same lens that you see things through is what makes America great. It's the diversification of our country that is so important, and free speech is just a very, very important pillar. We promise to use this time to promote nonviolent answers, but we're not going to be baited. We're not going to let them bait us into anger. We're going to attack this smart. We will speak. We're going to advocate for fair elections. Of course, we're for rule of law, peaceful protesting, of course, but we're going to work, Ben, to protect that First Amendment right.
Well, if there's any glimmer of hope, and I do think people should focus on this, that is, we have the majority of governors in this country are Republicans. The majority of state legislators are controlled by the Republican Party. There are many battles that we can not just fight, but win on a state-by-state basis. That is where we've got to take this fight, knowing that Washington is very clearly coming after conservative voices, silencing us, even talking about, getting rid of Republican and Trump supporters. There's 75 million Americans who they say we need to reprogram. It's scary that 75 million Americans they look at as people that need to be reprogrammed, and the children need to be re-educated. It's not a time to be sad. It's not a time to disengage. It's a time to get involved now with AMAC more than ever before, because if you take a break for a month or two, the left is going to take advantage of that.
That's right, Ben. One other thing, we see in North Dakota, there is a bill that would let censored citizens file lawsuits against social platforms like Facebook and Twitter. So we're going to watch very carefully what happens on the state level. We know that Section 230, we recall, when Donald Trump tried to remove some of the protections that allow them to get away with acting like publishers and suppress the conservative voice. So we're keeping a close eye on the state level, and we'll be educating our members with all of the opportunities and legal recourse that we determine and develop, and keeping you folks very much involved. But thank you, Ben, for bringing me on to talk about this specifically, because it is such an important issue that AMAC is fighting for.
We're going to be watching it very closely. You're going to be getting a lot of information from our emails, so make sure you check those emails, and also the AMAC magazine. It is time to continue the fight to protect our First and Second Amendment rights, and we are clearly dedicated to doing that here at AMAC. And again, Rebecca, I appreciate your leadership.
Thank you.
As you said, it's time to get involved. It's time to get the members active. It's time for us to protect our freedoms, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Thanks again for coming on AMAC Weekly News.
Thank you, Ben.
There's another very big issue that is happening in the world right now that a lot of people are not paying attention to, and that is, how is America's foreign policy going to be changing under a Biden administration? Joining me now to talk about this is our own AMAC national spokesman and former Assistant Secretary of State under Colin Powell, Bobby Charles. Bobby, I appreciate you coming on AMAC Weekly News this week, and this has been overshadowed, but there is a massive shift in America's foreign policy. Many people don't realize that the guy that did the Iran deal to send them billions of dollars in cash is now in charge of Middle East policy. We've even seen terrorists already take advantage of the fact they know that Donald Trump's not the president, and they can destabilize the region in the Middle East. We had the first major explosion in Iraq in the last 2 years happened on the day that Joe Biden became the president. When you look at what's happening around the world right now, the Paris Climate Accord, getting back in the World Health Organization, what are we going to have and what are we going to be seeing over the next 6 months or the next year from this president?
So, Ben, you're focused on something that I think most Americans should focus on, but don't really have time or energy or maybe even want to focus on. And I think it boils down to this. Big picture, uncertainty on the world stage is perilous. When there is a question about how resolved the United States is to address our enemies' intentions and to preempt them and to deter them, then our enemies get vigorous, they get ambitious, they get eager. And we have 4 or 5 major enemies out there that people don't think much about, but ought to start thinking about. As you know, and have pointed out to me before, you've now got mortars falling in on the green zone that hasn't happened in years. You've got Iran becoming of course, those are Iranian militias that are responsible for that. But you have Iran becoming very vigorous about their nuclear program, pushing the line, threatening the United States. I mean, just before Trump left office, and it's very important that we did this, the Pentagon and the State Department agreed to send a nuclear sub Ohio class in just beside Iran and surfaced it. We don't surface our boomers, and we surfaced it with 154 Tomahawk missiles on it to say, don't go there. But Iran is going to go there. They're going to threaten our allies in the region. They're going to threaten us. North Korea is going to do the same thing. They're going to reinitiate their missiles. China and Russia are both of concern. Russia could easily try to roll in to an Eastern European state or portion of a state, which they've been thinking about for a while, maybe even Scandinavian. And China, big time, is out there. That genie's not going to be put back in the bottle, but China thinks that this is a soft administration, one that they have by the collar, one that they, if they haven't bought and owned them, they nevertheless don't think they're going to stand up. So I think the problem we've got is that internationally, Ben, people look out over the horizon and they try to understand, what is this Biden administration about? They know that it was Obama Biden before it was Biden, and that was a very weak, pliable, frankly, somewhat cowardly administration. And they've just gotten off 4 years of something that looked a lot like Ronald Reagan when it comes to international policy, aggressive, courageous. I think we're at a tough moment and we need to stand firm. I hope and I pray that people like Tony Blinken and the new Secretary of Defense and Bill Burns at CIA put their heads together and say, by God, we got to make it clear right off the bat that we're not going to suffer an attack on the United States or on our allies, because that's a risk.
Let's talk about the financial side of things for a moment. The Keystone Pipeline has been stopped, the construction of it. This is only going to help give a significant amount of money. We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars to Middle Eastern countries that support terrorism that have really pulled back from that because their economies are suffering because of the low oil prices. Why? 2 reasons. 1, because we became energy independent, and 2, a lot less oil has been used during these shutdowns, COVID-19, the pandemic around the world. They're now seeing this big opportunity that is very clear. We're going back to the old policies of the Biden administration, or of the Obama administration, now the Biden administration, with our international oil policy and lack of international independence with our oil policies. How terrifying is this from the perspective that you look at? And it seems very clear. They are about to get paid in the Middle East, and they're going to have a lot of money to do a lot more things with it.
So let's unpack that and be even more specific. Iran is about to benefit enormously. Why? Not only are we inflicting a self-inflicted wound, an unforced error by getting rid of our own energy independence, which Trump was very clear that we needed. Frankly, most conservatives understand that we need. It's not just a free market. It's not just jobs. It's energy independence. The shutting down of the Keystone Pipeline essentially cuts off another significant avenue, not only teeing off our ally to the north, but shuts down an avenue for sustained energy independence. But what else does it do in the context of this administration? Wendy Sherman is about to be the Deputy Secretary of State. She was the architect of the Iran deal. Don't think for a minute that all of our sanctions that we've got on Iran right now are going to stick. They're not. The Biden administration is going to pull those sanctions off. So what's going to happen is that Iran is going to get regorged with oil money. Iran becomes a threat, therefore, of greater significance, not just to us, and energy independence, but specifically to Saudi Arabia, to all the Sunni nations, to Israel. and to stability in the Middle East, because they are, of course, the underwriter of Hezbollah and Hamas, two of the biggest terrorist organizations in the world. So that's what you're opening the door to. You know, when you unbar the door and you let the monster in, you don't think that they're going to play by the rules. They're not.
Bobby, it's going to be a very tough next couple of years, and this administration seems to not want to be tough on the individuals that you just talked about. It's going to change things, and I think part of this is they really do want us to get back to $4 or $5 a gallon gas. It also is about control in this country as well. Bobby, I appreciate your time. AMAC National Spokesman Bobby Charles. We'll see you back again real soon.
Thank you.
That's it for this edition of your AMAC Weekly News. A quick reminder, if you haven't joined AMAC or renewed your AMAC membership, do it right now. It's so important that you are engaged and involved in AMAC, especially after we're dealing with this new administration. Also, make sure you tell your family and friends and share this video on social media. And finally, don't forget, when you're a member of AMAC, you get the AMAC magazine. That magazine is now going to be more important than ever before. I'm Ben Ferguson, and I'll see you back next week for our next episode.